On this episode of the podcast, I have with me Srini Rajagopal. He is the SVP of Engineering and Head of Engineering at Navan Expense. He works at Navan, and he's going to talk to us about integrating Gen AI into engineering. We're going to be talking about factors to consider when you're trying to build with Gen AI in mind, building products from the ground up, and also integrating legacy products and features. We're also going to talk about how do you bring everyone along and what does success look like. I'm excited about this episode. Srini, thanks for joining us.
Thanks, Amar, for having me. Excited to be here.
Absolutely. Okay. So let us know what Navan does before we dive in.
Sure. Navan is a leading travel and expense company. So we help with corporate travel and expense. And this means anything you do with respect to booking flights, all forms of travel, hotels, trains, rails. We've been around for the last 10 years or so. And we've been in North America earlier and then expanded into EMEA. And we're one of the leading travel and expense platforms that are out there.
Awesome. All right. Well, I'm excited about this episode because I really think that we have been talking about Gen AI for a long time. I feel like there's a lot of moving parts. And I think when we're talking about Gen AI and where it sits within engineering, there are different factors. Obviously, enterprises are trying to take advantage of Gen AI, but when you're trying to build it into your product, I think we're looking at something different. Maybe that's a good starting point. When you're looking at building Gen AI into engineering, what are some of the factors that might be different compared to if you're at an enterprise and you're trying to incorporate Gen AI into your solutions?
That's a good question, Amar. I think the way I look at it is two ways, right? One is, what are the problems or what's the job to be done by the user? And what are the things that could be done much more efficiently by using Gen AI? The second set of things are the problems that you couldn't solve. There's a job to be done, but there's no way to do it. What are things that can get unlocked now by having Gen AI? Because you can scale what you're doing to a degree you couldn't if you had to have somebody sit behind and actually make that happen. So these are the two bifurcations we think about, and retrofitting the user needs as opposed to retrofitting what the product does is the right way to think about it.
So, and I guess, as you're kind of looking at building with Gen AI and actually having it integrate into the product, obviously there's some products that are built from the ground up, some new features that are built from the ground up. There's going to be some legacy products and features that need to incorporate Gen AI. As you approach where to start or where a Gen AI can be integrated, what's the experience as an engineering leader from looking at existing legacy products and features versus when you're trying to build it from the ground up? I think there's advantages and probably disadvantages to both. What are you seeing?
Makes sense. An example of what we do right now, for example, is we provide dashboards and metrics and help our CFOs and accountants understand what the spend of the platform is. And when we do that, the way we used to do that is we used to have a fixed set of dashboards. You would understand your data sliced by the way we thought you needed. One of the benefits with Gen AI that we're able to do right now is slice the data the way you want it to be. So it's completely personalized. You have the flexibility to slice it the way you want, understand your data, how you want it to be. So what it opens up effectively is infinite personalization. So you don't get one end of the spectrum where it's really, really hard to build. You have to know SQL, you have to know all the semantics to build these dashboards, or you get a fixed set of dashboards. What this allows us is natural language, you talk the way you would talk to ask somebody for data, and we're able to generate that on the fly. So that's one example. So essentially what we're doing is making everybody have the superpower of understanding what you can do and have the flexibility to get what you want to get done faster. If you think about it, the two things Navan helps you do, one is save time, save money. And how do you make that better for every user? That's what we're trying to do effectively at scale.
When you look at the relationship with product and you look at what they're looking to do with the existing, I mean, you guys have been around for 10 years, so you guys have an existing user base, you have an existing product. When you work in the relationship with product and they're trying to understand the new features and roadmaps that can be brought out, obviously there's probably a lot of ideas and limited budgets and resources to do them. When you're partnering with them, how do you prioritize what makes most sense for highest value? And the reason I'm asking that is a lot of the stuff we're looking at for generative AI, we don't have a deep track record to kind of lean back on.
That makes sense. I think there are two sets of things, right? One is internal development velocity and things we get from using Gen AI tooling. That is completely engineering driven. So what are the platform improvements we can do so we can make every engineer 10x better? We can improve the velocity. We can get to things we couldn't earlier. So that is one set of things that's completely agnostic of what the product does. The second thing is Navan always focuses on what's the value to the customer. So that's the metric we use. And using that, what's the highest impact thing we could be doing with tooling that you couldn't do before? So there may be context. For example, if you look at our platform, there are two sides. One is the admins who are trying to administrate all the rules and all the policies they have, and the user who's trying to understand what am I doing and does it fall within a policy? Like, how do you help them both work closer together, and how do you help that context propagate automatically without either the admin having to do any work to find out, does this transaction fall within policy or not? And inversely, for a user to know, hey, is this within policy? What should I be doing? Like bringing that automatically, the magic of what happens is the user doesn't have to do any work, the admin doesn't have to do any work. We understand the policy. We do the hard work of interpreting everything that happens. We have the context of the user, where the transaction happened, their calendar information, everything around what the user's been doing and what other users in their company are doing, and using that context along with what the admin has set up the policies to help reconcile their financial numbers. So this is what is the magic of what we're doing.
I like that. Very obviously, lots of data involved, and lots of opportunity. When you're talking to the business and you're talking about the future of Gen AI and what is possible and what you can do, obviously, from what I'm hearing at other companies, there's a lot of interest. Lots of stakeholders want to come along and have a solution built for them. And I think sometimes that prioritization, the trade-offs is obviously a challenging one. How do you work with the stakeholders that have to wait for a solution to hit that? And the reason I'm asking that is obviously if you're selected as the highest value and you're seeing that Gen AI is being incorporated a product or feature you're representing or working with, that's great. If you're telling me it's just lower on the priority list and I got to wait a year or two, I don't know, I'm just throwing out numbers, dampens my excitement a little bit, but I understand. How do you help those other people who necessarily have to come along for the ride, but have to be more patient, stay invested and stay with you?
I think in general, there has been a lot of technologies that have been where we need to build it and then you see the impact. With Gen AI, one of the benefits is it's pulling things forward. It's not pulling things backward, meaning everything gets faster. So what we're trying to do is we have the problem statement, like every user should be able to check into a hotel with their CCAs, their credit card authorizations that we send out without having any issues. How do you pull that forward to 100% where there may be a hotel with no fax connection or poor internet connection? And this happens because we have voice agents. We can help connect to these hotels and automate this away. So where are you able to scale our product to get to what the customer needs? And how are we able to do it faster? I think that's the magic of Gen AI, where things are happening faster. It's not like, hey, it's going to take 6 months to build out, and then you see the value. It's incrementality right away.
Are you guys, when it comes to Gen AI, and you mentioned making things more efficient, you refer to developers, how far along are you in terms of developers leveraging or actually testing or working with some of these Gen AI solutions to help them actually get more efficient?
I think it's not uniform across everybody. So all developers are using Gen AI tooling. A lot of people use it for, as you said, like test automation and testing and generating code. And I think, for example, our front-end developers see a whole lot more productivity compared to our mobile developers. It's also tooling is built out better for web. Probably there's more code bases, there is more standardization there, so they're able to get that value sooner. So there's pretty much a 50-60% incremental velocity we're seeing on front-end development, for example. And all of this is not just in terms of testing, but even code in terms of what the code output is, in terms of the quality of the code, standardization, all of that is happening. So more and more people are becoming editors as opposed to just becoming code monkeys or where you're outputting code. So it's like Yeah, it's like if you think about it, like editors or film editors get better and better cameras, but that doesn't mean everybody becomes a James Cameron or somebody, right? Like you still need to have that skill to understand what's the right thing to do. You elevate your art and your craft to the higher level degree of what's the scaling of this, how does this read later on, how do other developers interpret it. So it helps you push your craft to the next level, and you're able to think about it more holistically, and you're not just caught in the small details. But ability to go both deep and broad is very useful for developers in this paradigm.
I want to come back to a question about legacy products, but I want to follow up with what you just mentioned. As people are using Gen AI tools to actually become more efficient developers, and this is we're going to look out in the future then, so we won't hold you to this one, but just your opinion. Where do engineers apply the efficiency? And I guess the question in that is, if I need less time to write code, which previously takes time, I have more time to do X, and X could be, I talk about shifting left into the business. I think no one else is talking about it. I think I'm talking about it. I think I'm trying to create something, but I do believe software engineers could move more into the business and become more functional in some aspects. They have more time to pick up more projects. Where does that efficiency go? Where do they use that efficiency if we're starting to see some gains?
I think you're right in that point, Amr. So what happens is two things. One is, instead of a team of 3, 4 engineers, you could have a single engineer take this problem and solve it. So they have a whole lot more context, and they're able to understand the entire business problem, and they're able to impact the solution. The second thing is, you're able to go a whole lot faster. Earlier, if it was an ML problem, you had to design the right features, build the ML model, validate it. That whole cycle is now order of days as opposed to weeks and months and validation, all of that. So it helps you iterate faster. And by iterating faster, you're closer to the business problem and actually delivering the impact, as opposed to you having to have 3 developers validate it. The whole cycle is faster. So it gives people a whole lot more energy because they're closer to the problem and they're able to solve that end-to-end solution, and they can take on more problems. I think there's no dearth of problems. And the good thing is there's more tooling to help you solve these problems now.
I think that's really interesting, because I think back in the day, rules engines were very popular because technology companies thought, well, we could build rules engines and they will provide some of this context, right? Because we were trying to, take that weight off the shoulder of the developers. That quite didn't work. I mean, I think that was pretty obvious. It never really became, I mean, there are a lot of big rules engine products out there, but I don't think it really became common for most teams to use that. They still were building that into code. Do you think, as there are more and more tools developed, that we're going to see a shift in terms of software engineering from programming language driven to more natural language, more rules development, more business logic development? Is that what you're going to be seeing, or are you going to seeing some of the scaffolding and some of the basic stuff that are common to all apps? You can just throw it up and then you have to fill in the gaps. I mean, what are your kind of visions on that? Rules engines were very popular because technology companies thought, well, we could build rules engines and they will provide some of this context, right? Because we were trying to, take that weight off the shoulder of the developers. That quite didn't work. I mean, I think that was pretty obvious. It never really became, I mean, there are a lot of big rules engine products out there, but I don't think it really became common for most teams to use that. They still were building that into code. Do you think, as there are more and more tools developed, that we're going to see a shift in terms of software engineering from programming language driven to more natural language, more rules development, more business logic development? Is that what you're going to be seeing, or are you going to seeing some of the scaffolding and some of the basic stuff that are common to all apps? You can just throw it up and then you have to fill in the gaps. I mean, what are your kind of visions on that?
I think it is not in that frame. Like earlier, if you look at it, there were no frameworks. You had to build everything from scratch. And then there is more and more frameworks that come out, and then that helps you go in a structured way and helps you move faster. I think that's the way it is happening, where you don't have to do the repetitive tasks again. What you're doing is you're doing the high-level things of mapping the business problem into the engineering domain. You're able to map it into what part scale, what part should I focus on, where does the personalization happen, So you're able to break it into more boxes that you care about, and the boxes get filled automatically. So you're elevating your craft to the higher level. In that aspect, I think it's more exciting for engineers.
When you talked about legacy products and you're looking at bringing a solution like Gen AI into it, what are some of the complexities of doing that? Because obviously you have a product, it's working, there is a large user base, you're going to introduce something that has to be some testing. Gen AI has been known to be moving along that path of consistency and accuracy. We won't talk about hallucinations, but there's factors, right? As you're kind of integrating something like that where, it's an older product, you have the user base that's already, they know what to expect. How do you work around that?
It's an interesting user experience problem to solve because like the way our keyboards are placed is not because it's the best set of keys. It was originally done for a typewriter where it is the way that it get less jammed because it's less efficient. So people have learned to live with it kind of thing, right? Like I think, but with every generation, you will get a new user experience, a new interface. We're also looking at this in a few spaces, and you will see some of this come out from our company over the next few months. And I think it'll be exciting to see that. But given purely from an engineering aspect, right? Earlier code used to be binary. It's right, it works, I can validate. Now the context is more probabilistic. Like you need to think in probabilistic terms and does it work in what scenarios? What are the guardrails I have? And how do I think about it in terms of not black and white, but different shades of right that I need to see and then see how that will scale. So that is one mindset shift that developers have to make and think about validation and think about the problem more holistically and think about what's the job to be done and mapping the right UI for that, as opposed to taking an UI and slapping Gen AI on top of it. I think that's the other difference to think about.
I guess from your perspective, as you're in this journey, you're I don't know how far down, but you're making progress down this journey. Are there things that you've seen, things that you've learned that maybe others can learn from, can understand? Are there any obvious things that in hindsight you wish you knew if you're going down this journey?
I think a few things, right? One is clearly if you make it work in one language, internationalization is almost free for you. So it gives you that ability to go global very soon. So it's very effective. That's a great side benefit of adopting these tools. The other thing is, as opposed to having hard guardrails where you can actually know every failure situation and you guard against it, the easier thing is to build another LLM or another instance of your Gen AI that's watching what needs to not happen. So that's the easier guardrail than you knowing exhaustively what failures can be. So thinking more in terms of everything from that same tooling perspective. Use this sort of tools. You don't have to live half here and half there. Like if you went all in, how would it be more effective? Is easier way to solve these problems.
I guess from your perspective, as you're seeing your technology company, you guys have a track record for delivering. How are you guys tracking the success of Gen AI? I don't know if they're POCs, projects. How do you, whatever they are, I guess at this point, everyone's a different journey, but how do you track success? Because I think success is hard in this capacity because a lot of people, again, don't have a ton of experience, but I'd love to hear from you.
I think everything goes to the North Star, which is customer value. Like, are we providing customer value? And what incremental value we're able to provide? Like, this set of things we could not do before, and now this is unlocked. Like, are we having our admins, our administrators of the product be really happy with this product? CSAT, NPS, these are all things we're tracking and seeing with every new launch how this shifts. And that's the North Star. We believe if we can have happy customers, everything else will follow. As you can see, costs are falling dramatically year over year, like OpenAI costs are 2 orders of magnitude, 3 orders of magnitude going down. So cost may be a barrier, but that's going to get solved. I think the North Star always has been customer value, and that's what we'll continue to focus on.
Srini, I think everything you mentioned and everything you said, obviously you guys are, going down this path. And I think everything you have talked about is very helpful for people to hear. I'm sure there are people out there that love to connect with you to ask you a little bit more about things you've mentioned on the show, how the Gen AI integration into your engineering team alone. I mean, that could be a whole episode on its own, how that's going. What is a good way of touching base with you and connecting with you if they had a follow-up question?
LinkedIn or Twitter, I will share the handle with Amr, and I think that will be the best way. And Navan's amazing product, if any of your companies want to try it, I would love to also intro you to the product.
Absolutely. We'll put some of those links in there for you. Srini, thanks for coming on. Thanks for sharing. I appreciate your time.
Thanks, Amr. It's been a pleasure.
Absolutely. All right. That's it for this episode. Be back again. Different guest, different topic. Until then, two things. One, I think this is a great topic. I mean, when you talk about integrating Gen AI into engineering, we've talked about if it's a ground up legacy product, the actual engineering efficiencies gained by Gen AI and kind of how teams are kind of shake. And also, how do you bring everybody along? I think actually that's a really crucial thing because we have probably a long list of people interested in this. As Srini said, they're trying to pull it forward. And I think that's an interesting component to think about. So please share this episode with somebody else that might find it interesting. Also, like, subscribe, comment. Let me know how the show's going for you. Until next time, thank you and goodbye.